today we're discussing, we are at Startup Saturday. Startup Saturday is basically where we invite founders and we discuss with them about their startup journeys on that particular theme. Every month we have a different theme, and based on that we invite speakers. Now these could be entrepreneurs, they could be academicians, technologists, government representatives, and so on. So this month being the International Women's Day on the 8th of March, so we are focusing on women entrepreneurs. And over the course of this, discussion, this talk, we will focus on various aspects around, uh, we all know that it's very challenging to be, a women entrepreneur, given that the support system is still not mature or not as per the expectation. Also given that there is, if I may say, there is a bias, there is a male bias, where be it investors or be it the support system, they're all built for the male entrepreneurs. But yeah, we need to do more about this if we want to bring the 50% of the humankind into this fold where they can also take up entrepreneurship proactively. I think that a lot needs to be done. And from this conversation, we hope that we'll come up with some points, or we'll come up with some kind of understanding where we highlight the challenges and maybe also the strengths that will, for people who are going to watch this video at a later point in time, for them, it will give an insight as to what are the different challenges, plus what are the available support systems, and how can we make this better. So that's broadly the discussion we're going to get into. Ashwati, that sounds right? Okay, great. So first we will start with, each one of your startups. You get a couple of minutes, quick introduction about your startup, your background, and where do you come from, what do you do, what is your startup into, just very quickly in a couple of minutes. Yeah, Anju, if you'd like to start.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So I come from a very remote place in Kerala, and we are the world's first team to make reusable menstrual pads. Am I audible? We make reusable, or we train rural women groups to make reusable menstrual pads from cotton cloth and banana fiber. And yeah, our journey so far has been, it's been 3 long years. And our aim is to make reusables mainstream and disposables known as the, old-fashioned bad choice that they really are. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
Sure, sure. And you're also based out of Kerala only? Saukyam Reusable Pads based out of Kerala?
So Saukyam Reusable Pads has a presence in several North Indian states as well. We have production centers in Jammu, Uttarakhand, UP and Bihar.
Okay.
And this year we are building last mile delivery networks in certain states. Jharkhand is one that we are concentrating on. We just got started with Odisha and West Bengal also.
Okay.
So the idea is to have a pan-India presence.
Okay, sure. Ashwati, over to you. Quick introduction about Avsarshala and about yourself. Yeah.
So Avsarshala is opportunities, a center of opportunity. So Avsar means opportunities and Shala means hub. So we are a platform that curates opportunities for school children, that is K-12 segment, classes 1 to 12. When I say opportunities, it spans across all arts, sports, even fellowships, scholarships, leadership programs, and anything and everything that a child should utilize in order to grow in his or her areas of interest and talent. So we help children connect with opportunities in regional, national, and international space. The best part about what I do with Avsarshala is bringing international opportunities for Indian students. Very recently, we got to collaborate with a program called Youth Forum Switzerland, Global Changemakers Project. It was something that was reserved only for European and students from US, but for the first time, we could bring it to India. We were able to connect with close to 4,500 students in India and give them this opportunity to be part of this program. So that's something that we are looking forward to, not just curating opportunities for children, but also get hold of such coveted international opportunities and get it for our Indian students. Mm-hmm. So yes, that's the nutshell of what we do at Avsarshala. Lofty dream, and we are hopeful that we will bring in the impact that we look forward to in the coming years. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So how many years since you've started, Ashwati?
It's close to 1.5, nearing 2 years, 1.5 years approximately.
Okay.
So yeah, I am also from Kerala, by the way.
Okay, wonderful. So, although it doesn't matter right now because everybody is working remote, but you're prominently present in which city?
Pan India. So
Okay.
we started out in 6 cities in South India, and we are slowly moving upwards.
Wonderful.
So now we have presence pan India, and as you rightly said, now it doesn't really matter. Even the opportunities we curate, earlier it was like a student in Coimbatore used to get something in Coimbatore with a little flavor of Coimbatore, and what a child in Bangalore was getting a little bit different, but now it's all the same. There is only a little demarcation between everything that we deserve.
Right. So would you call Avsar Shala a marketplace for opportunities? Is that something for students? Marketplace?
That's where we are headed to. Not exactly a marketplace, but that's going to be a platform which will bring in students, obviously their parents, talent enablers, event organizers, and all of the ecosystem players. Like if a person wants to give a scholarship to a particular student, all the the whole ecosystem will be there in our platform.
Okay.
So students and their interest, everything, we are actually catering them on a personalized basis. So getting them connected to the right opportunity is what actually matters.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So, being Anju and Ashwati both working in a very, very different industry, very, very diverse industry. I'm sure over the course of this session, we'll find that the challenges still remain common to a large extent. Although yes, sector-wise there will be different challenges, but we'll also delve upon what are the sector-specific and what are the sector-agnostic challenges that each one of you face. So, Anju, I'll come over to you. Particularly with Sokim reusable pads. How do you look at this as an opportunity for, first of all, for women entrepreneurs? Would you recommend more women entrepreneurs to get into this, or you'd say, no, it's too difficult, I'm struggling, let it be, you don't get into this? What would you say for that?
No, there's no thinking about this answer. The world needs more women entrepreneurs.
Yeah, definitely. But in this particular industry, would you suggest more women get into it?
Definitely, definitely. I'll give you a couple of small examples. So when we started, um, you know, uh, yeah, so we had a tough time finding people to build our team. How do folks go back and say, oh, I'm working with a company that makes sanitary napkins?
Right.
So it used to be kind of, even at the interview, they would be like, okay, what do I have to do? And what is it all about? And so on.
A lot of them still consider it a taboo subject, as a subject matter. A lot of people don't want to discuss it publicly.
It's changed quite a lot, though. We recently advertised for 2 open positions, and we had 29 applications. And if women entrepreneurs don't build such products, who's going to do it? Of course, male entrepreneurs can do it, and that's great. There's a lot of male entrepreneurs working in this space.
Yeah.
As female entrepreneurs, perhaps the slight advantage that we have is a personal sort of connect with the product, a personal connect with the users, being able to take feedback, tweak the product, and so on. So women entrepreneurs are definitely needed. Building the product itself, I mean, we are the world's first team making such a product. There are others who make reusable pads, and there are folks who use banana fiber for making disposable pads. But to combine the two, so the R&D went through its own, it took its own time and went through its own set of challenges. I remember in the early days that we had launched, we had folks saying that, why are you promoting cloth? This cloth can cause cancer. And of course, cloth does not cause cancer. There's reusable pads, and there are standards for reusable pads in many countries, and in India also. That should come about in a year or two. There are draft standards being circulated.
Wonderful.
But in a way, we have come full circle where now we are part of a project, Amrita University and a Canadian university, Ryerson, we're collaborating on a cervical cancer project. This is the early detection of cervical cancer amongst underserved women communities, rural communities. And each of the participants gets a set of Socium reusable pads. So the message being that, this is a great product for menstrual hygiene, use it, and you are at a lower risk for, if women don't take up these kinds of problems, who's going to do it?
Right.
So
that, one very interesting observation there, that cloth causes cancer. I think this is very similar to what the packaged water industry advertised, that tap water is harmful and bottled water is good for health.
Exactly.
Something of that sort. Of course, it's all exaggerated. Not all tap water is good. Not all tap water is bad. I think the same applies here as well.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, Ashwati, over to you now. About, I think, if I say Avsarshala would be a tech-enabled company, if I may say, right? It will be a tech-enabled company. So is that, we all know that women are breaking the glass ceiling, particularly in the tech industry. They are reaching new heights. The latest one being the Bumble IPO, where we all saw what kind of response it gathered across the globe. So what's your take on that? More women entrepreneurs in tech, of course, it's better. But would you recommend, is that the right career path they should be taking, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, so you're asking a full-time entrepreneur whether I would recommend it to other women. Definitely yes, because for me, I have had many, I have donned many hats. I've been, I worked with 2 other corporates before I was working with Amazon in the capacity of a manager as well. So after all these, I've come to a position where I'm enjoying every single day. Like, when I'm doing something, when I'm struggling with something, I know exactly why I'm doing and what I have to, achieve at the end of the day. So for me, it has spelled more flexibility and more, that sense of fulfillment. I've been getting that most with this, entrepreneurial journey than any other corporate or any other thing that I had done before. So I guess Srikant's net has some issue. I mean, he's still so. Okay.
I'm so sorry about this.
That's
There's a
okay.
power cut at my end, but yeah, there's a power cut, but yeah, we are on call. Anubhav, you will have to step in. I'm sorry for this. Anubhav, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm really sorry. You'll have to step in, Anubhav. I have a power cut. Sadly, yeah, can't help it.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Ashwati. You were talking about your journey.
Yeah. So women in tech, especially, this is one observation I keep repeating to everybody. What we've seen is the involvement of girl children in STEM related, that is science, technology, and all engineering, maths, all everything to do with tech. The involvement of girl children in STEM education is highest in India. So if we look at a global scale, it is standing at around 32% or something. Like 32% of the students who pursue STEM for higher studies are 32% are women. But in India, it stands at 46%. But when it comes to pursuing job or anything that even higher studies, like going for a PhD or even postgraduate in science, technology, engineering, and maths, the numbers drop to 18%. Only 18% of the students or professionals in these areas are women. That means we have that huge population which is overeducated, underutilizing their potential, and not even getting into fields that matter to them. So in my opinion, this huge number of people, that whole group of women who are waiting to embrace some work, they are the ones that we have to utilize. So yes, India has such a huge potential when it comes to involving women into tech. And nothing better than starting out on your own, no matter whether it's a woman or a man or non-binary stepping into entrepreneurship. The challenges are the same. So I wouldn't say a woman entrepreneur has woman challenges when it comes to entrepreneurship. Everybody has the same challenges, but the solutions that that usually works for a woman entrepreneur is different from a male or even anyone else that embraces entrepreneurship. So yeah, when we look at it that way, we might have to talk about the solutions or what works for a woman entrepreneur. But embracing entrepreneurship, that's for everyone, not just men in tech. So women in tech, yes.
No, very interesting insights with numbers. I mean, you have your data backed up properly to support all your statements. So now coming, see, I want to point out on the more positive sides of the ecosystem, though Srikanth was very rightly critical about it, which he is very correct on that point. Now, one is completely a tech startup that Afsasala is. Sokyam is not non-tech but very impactful company. So as a ecosystem support, if you can both quickly give a perspective, because then people who are coming to so what we do with Startup Saturdays, since it has become online, we record these sessions and put it up on our website. So then it becomes a a knowledge platform for anyone can come in, log in to the website and see our talks and listen. So if somebody is coming here right now and and want to understand what exactly are the ecosystem support that a tech startup gets and a non-tech startup with a huge social impact, the fundraising is different. For Afsasara, the model is different. I'll come to that. For Sokyam, it's different. So right now, if you can just quickly focus 2 to 3 minutes, both of you, on the ecosystem support that you got from your respective ecosystems that you are part of. I guess both of you are part of the Kerala startup ecosystem, but Sokyam and Afsasala, I know both startups very closely. Both of them have gone to explore other ecosystems also, and have businesses in different ecosystems. So just quickly, a comparative study of ecosystem, and also what it is for a tech startup and for a non-tech startup. Anju, to start, let's start with you.
Sure, sure, sure. So, this year with the lockdown, it's actually in many ways been a blessing in disguise. It's given us time to sort of step back, reflect, take a look at our journey, see where we are going, what's needed to take us forward. So in our case, I'm part of the Mata Amritanandamayi Mutt, and Amma, she's globally revered as a spiritual and humanitarian leader. Amma has provided the vision. So many years back, I did my MBA and so on, but I don't know how to build a business. Mentors, having the right mentors, in our case, of course, through the Head Start network, and even if it was very short interactions with the mentors that Head Start provided, the contribution has been immense. I also have these weekly sessions with a mentor from Silicon Valley, and that has helped me put on a sort of a business hat and think in terms of, okay, what is needed to make this business sustainable? Yes, it is meant to provide employment. It is meant to do a lot of good. We sell at very low prices, have very thin margins, but we cannot really confuse ourselves and think of ourselves as an NGO. We are a business at the end of the day. So all of these things, all of this kind of thinking, it is having experienced mentors, having access to them, both from Head Start and from some of the other programs that we've been part of. I would say that that's played a big role. It's, as I'm sure Ashwati will also point out, it's not an easy journey. There's a lot of hard work needed, whether you're male, whether you're female. Having a team that you can depend on, having perhaps a spiritual practice that can help you remain grounded and provide strong leadership to that team. So those were some of the other things that I think worked in our case.
Interesting. Anju, I believe the organization that you're talking about, which is the spiritual organization, it has its own incubator also that helps innovative ideas to come through. Can you quickly share some insights on how the organization helps somebody to start up or though I know a bit of it by meeting you one or two times, and you came to Hyderabad also to explore our incubator. Somehow I haven't been lucky enough to get Aswati to explore TRIACI and the Hyderabad ecosystem. But yeah, interesting. So yeah, Anju, can you put some light on what this incubator does and how it helps?
So Amrita University has an incubator, the Amrita TBI, Technology Business Incubator, and they have been part of our journey right from the very early days. One big support that we received from them, and that's been central to all of our work actually, is the banana fiber processing. Since again, we are the world's first team to do, make reusable menstrual pads from banana fiber, there's no blueprint that we can follow. Banana fiber is used in a lot of applications, is also used to make disposable pads. It's used in a slightly different way, but to make reusable pads. So all of the, I would say the machines that we have right now, we extract the banana fiber, we clean it, we make the banana fiber sheets. What started out as a very, very manual process and would limit our productivity. And now because demand has increased so much also, having these machines in place is helping us move much faster. So Amrita TBI totally provided that kind of support to help us build these machines, go through the different iterations, and we've had access to Amrita University faculty, mechanical engineering faculty. I myself am a mechanical engineer, but without the help of these faculty and without the help of the incubator, I don't think we could have built these machines. So in a very specific area, which was key actually to our, even to scale, they have helped in a big way. They gave us space in Amrita University to sit that we don't utilize right now because we have our own place now that we produce the pads, we extract the banana fiber, we try and do all of the computer related work there also. So that's
interesting. Very nice to hear that. I mean, with a tech background, you have started a non-tech company. So it itself is a challenge that you have taken for yourself. And so good to hear that organizations like Amrita Institute and all are there. So people who would be listening to this, they know that there is a center which can help them through their programs. Through their entrepreneurship journey. Aswati, what's your take on ecosystem? How many have you explored and how is it, not in a gender comparison as such, but yeah, in case you want to put something very important there, would love to hear that because we also like to call a spade a spade. So it would be great if you can if you can throw some light on various ecosystems that have supported you.
Yeah, so for the ecosystem part, for me, I'm running an edtech company. I'm not exactly edtech, that is, I'm helping children skill up. And because I'm dealing with school children, one good network that has always backed whatever work Avasarshala does is Atal Tinker Labs. So we reached out to Atal incubation centers because there was a center AIC RAISE in Coimbatore, which was focusing on UN SDG goals. And in the very early stages of our startup journey itself, we realized that we were working in tandem with UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and we as a company wanted to explore what more we could do in this area. So because AIC RAISE was working with startups that were focusing on UN SDG goals, we had a very good working synergy with them right from the start. So through AIC RAISE, we were able to connect with Atal Tinker Labs, the whole network. And this has always helped us to reach out to more students as well as teachers. So this teacher community helps us a lot in understanding the ecosystem, understanding exactly what children are looking for. So even though we are having a very parent and child focus, inputs from teachers and schools have helped us, grow like anything. So this is a major support that kicked us forward in a particular direction, because when we don't have a school or like a network of schools that we can bank on, such nationwide networks could be utilized. We can piggyback on these kind of networks in order to make the whole ecosystem work in our advantage. So this is one thing. Next is as Anju rightly said, we are a startup which is in social impact, but we are also a for-profit social enterprise. Not many people understand this aspect of it. Like somehow people imagine that if we are doing a social impact, we are an NGO. We are not supposed to create profits. But not many people understand the social entrepreneurship angle. Even I did not get that. Like initially, I never realized that I was working in the social entrepreneurship area. I never called myself a social entrepreneur. But I got into networks. UNDP and AIM had created this Youth Collab. I was part of it. We came out as the top 5 innovators in Youth Collab for 2020-2021. And as part of this, we are also in many networks like Springboard Plus, which is like Asia Pacific network for winners of Youth Collab. We were the People's Choice Awardees. This has helped like anything. Like for me, it put all the social entrepreneurship, frameworks into place for me. I got connected to, organizations like Head Held High. They are helping us set our social impact measurements and, baseline impact measurements in place. I did not know any of these things. Like I wasn't taught all this in my MBA. I mean, I'm from an engineering background also. We never think about social impact and how to measure all this. But now I understand social audit and everything, those, that whole another world which I was not exploring because of these networks that I got into. So one main thing is explore opportunities. Like I am an opportunity curator for school children, but I totally get how many opportunities that entrepreneurs are not utilizing, women entrepreneurs especially, because now at least it's the right time to start out for a woman entrepreneur. There are so many networks, so many grants and fellowships that are out there to help especially leaders or women into entrepreneurship. I was part of Vital Voices Grow Fellowship in 2020. That was for business women across the world, only women business owners. So, I mean, men don't have these kind of advantages, to be fair to them. Like, they are treated as one of the entrepreneurs, but for women, we are called as that separate brand of, women entrepreneurs. Though I am a person who personally dislikes to be categorized as, a gender-based category when it comes to entrepreneurship, I should admit that even I have been, benefited a lot because there are ecosystems in place for women entrepreneurs. So go out and explore. That's the only thing that I would say. Whenever there is an opportunity, especially which aligns with your area, grab it, because you never know what opens up. Like I understood the whole aspect about social entrepreneurship, how I can network with UNDP. That was one thing, like they are helping us also grow in the space. So all this came about only when I grabbed opportunities. So
interesting. And see until you are benefiting out of it, don't worry about whether it is exclusively for you or not. But those organizations that you mentioned specifically gives a lot of insight for people to explore that, okay, something is there already, something is there that can be explored. And so that itself gives a lot of what do we say, a lot of connection prospects that people can explore. And that has been thank you for such details. So now coming to the point of like we did, so what now, exploring the social impact part of it, when did you both decided that okay, we need to impact? I mean, was it your calling always, or it happened to be when you started your entrepreneurship journey, it became a social impact thing? Or third point is, it was there and you wanted entrepreneurship to be the channel for bringing this impact? So what was your choice? To start with you, Aswati, how did the social impact angle came into, or I mean, under these 3 points which I asked?
Yeah. So for anyone who is familiar with my story, it all started out with a leadership program that I was part of while I was a student, as well as while I was working as a professional. So it spanned over 1.5 to 2 years. So it was a Kechtel World Youth Leadership Program that happened in Atlanta, USA. So this was a huge opportunity for me. It was just a leadership program that helped me grow as a person. But when I came back after this leadership program from US, there were many questions from parents. like you did your education, me did my education in Kerala. You worked in all like places where we are also there. Our students are also there in the same school that you went to, but you utilize certain opportunities and you're here. If you could do it, probably our students can too. But how do we find out such opportunities? So that is when we realize that we have this, like we know a lot of networks. We are part of many, many organizations. We are in touch with many opportunities that are being, especially for school children as well as for youth. We thought, why not we help parents and students connect with us? Because when I had been part of this leadership program, India is underrepresented. Although we have a huge number of talented children in India, not many of us really explore this part of education. We are always happy dealing with our books, but we don't step out and explore our areas and interest. So this was the main reason why we started out Avasar Shala. As Anubhav said, I guess we did not realize we were moving into entrepreneurship because this impact was more important to us. Even today, when we make any business decisions, we don't really look at it as a business. Even if it doesn't make any sense in terms of finance, or for anyone who is looking into our business, probably it might not make sense. But for us, the impact is very important. We are having a few interns working with us from London Business School right now. They are also helping us put together the impact framework. So what we usually tell them is, even if the numbers don't make sense to you, we are looking at the impact first. So I would say, though we did not call ourselves social entrepreneurships, impact was very important to us. And we used entrepreneurship as a channel to get into the space and reach out to more children to help them. But yeah, that's my side. Anju, what about you?
Amazing. Definitely, Anju has a lot more to add to it in a different perspective altogether. Yeah, Anju, go ahead.
I'll share my story a little bit. So nice to know, Ashwati.
Yes, definitely. Journey. Go ahead.
So, this was, I think, maybe 20 years back. I had finished my master's and my MBA and my MS from the University of Maryland at College Park. And then I was working for a management consulting firm. And of course, that's the type of life or job that most of us aspire to. That's when we met Amma. Again, the spiritual organization that I've been with for the past 18 years. And I remember the project we were working on at that time. It was with a chain of retail stores that had a presence all over the US. And our team's job was, they had hired our management consulting firm. It was PricewaterhouseCoopers. And we were to put in kiosks in these stores, so that if a customer walks in and doesn't find a t-shirt in the size or the color that they're looking for, the store doesn't end up losing that customer. The person can still walk up to a kiosk and place an order. Now, remember, we're talking about 20 years ago when internet shopping wasn't the big thing that it is now. And so it was a project that, the client was being audacious in proposing it, and our firm was looking at it as a good opportunity also. But I used to sit in those meetings and think, oh, is this what I'm going to do the rest of my life? Help people who are already having a lot of money make more money. And so now, many, many years later, I didn't want to sell t-shirts then. So I resigned. At one point of time, I just resigned. And then, long story short, we asked Amma, and it took a little bit of time. My husband and myself, we both moved to the ashram. I came first, and then he came a year and a half later. So at that time, I didn't want to sell t-shirts. I didn't want to use my time and energy for that. But now, I'm having to sell pads. I'm having to figure out the internet to sell pads. But I think you'll agree that there is a world of difference, isn't it? So that's what my journey with social entrepreneurship has been. This is not something that I aspired to. We set out to solve a problem, the problem of menstrual hygiene in rural India. and we were making pads and we were distributing them. Quickly understood that that's not sustainable, that's not the way to do it, that's not the way development organizations are approaching development these days. And so that's been my journey to entrepreneurship. And yes, now I don't know if I'm a seasoned businesswoman, but yes, I have learned a lot, and that's kind of my journey, Anubhav, Ashwati.
In your case, it was your mentor Amma who basically got you introduced to impacting lives and how you can be a change maker. Interesting. So kind of a mentor who brought you close to social impact, right? If I may put it right. So very interesting. So now coming to the part which is the bloodline or the lifeline of each startup, the funds part and the finance part of managing the, and more so, I mean, for social impact organizations, it is seen that okay, these are organizations that basically looks for grants and others. So what has been now, Ashwati's startup is little different in that way, because the fundraising that Ashwati does is more of a equity based fundraising. And now coming to explore the models and the challenges, I'll come to each one of you one by one. So starting with you, Ashwati, when did you feel the need of fundraising, and was it like equity fundraising was your only option, or you were also exploring impact grants that come from CSR or other institutions? So and how are you taken differently in these two aspects when you are pitching to a angel or a VC, or if you are pitching for a CSR or an impact fund? What difference do you see in the jury mindset, or in your own presentation, or in your own talk or pitch? How do you categorize these two, and what are your plans when you go to these two, and what kind of feedbacks you get from these two?
Okay. Lots of questions. I'll pick each one and go forward. So first thing, we are still completely bootstrapped. We are very cautious about all cost centers, and it takes a lot of thinking to decide to spend even a single penny when it comes to running our business. But the thing is, we have been profitable from day one. Like, it was a conscious decision for us to be not a spending company, but a company that plows back profits and uses it to sustain the business. So that has always helped us to be sustainable from day one. And we really did not look at VC funding or fundraising from initial days. We had always wanted to explore the grants route, CSR and grants. CSR only the prospects of us exploring CSR route came up only very recently, Anubhav. But the grants has always been a priority for us. Like, we are part of two. One is from Kerala Startup Mission. We got innovation grant very recently, and also Nidhi EIR, that is Entrepreneur in Residence from IIM Kozhikode live program. Both modest token of amount, but that is okay for us at this stage, because as I said, we are making profit, so it's good for us. When it comes to VC funding, it is for the next stage. Like, to be honest here, we are growing into that stage where we would require VC funding. So we are gearing up for it. Like, we are pitching, we are testing, we are, trying to tweak our model each time we pitch and get feedback. So by the time we are at a stage that we really, really need VC funding in order to move at least a day forward, we would be in a position where we are, safe and all set for that journey. So when I pitch for an social innovation grant or anything that has to do with CSR funds, I always look at it as these people are here in order to see if the business is self-sustaining, if it makes profit. They don't have to be spending on something that is like a cost center. But at the same time, this impacts more people. like in numbers. So if this is a business that impacts like the whole of India, all of the K-12 segment, nothing like that. So I try to show how it is scalable, how each, the impact that we give to each child is replicable throughout India. So that's the, approach that I always take. We have, like ways of showing what is the work that we do, what is the impact, and what is the outcome that they can expect. So all these actually give a lot of clarity that we know what we are doing. We know exactly how we are impacting like how we are creating a social impact. And that brings a lot of confidence in people to actually bank on us. So when it comes to a VC, yeah, they don't really look at, most of the VCs don't look at social impact because they're looking at companies that grow, startups which grow on a very high, so for them, numbers make a lot of sense. If I tell them that this is the amount that we are going to, like you will see us doing this sort of business in this time, like give them a smart goal, tell them the time frame, give them exactly what are the numbers we are expecting and why we are expecting. Like we shouldn't be saying that we're going to build a multi-billion. No, they understand. They're listening to 10 to 15 pitches every single day. So treat them with that respect. Don't bluff, tell them exactly what you are. Like for me, initially when I pitched, I knew I was not in a position to be raising funds at that stage because I got honest feedback. Why I got honest feedback is because I showed them exactly what we are. So if I don't do that, if I'm not honest with them, they won't probably come back to us when we are in a stage to raise funds. Most of the VCs kind of remember our name. We are in their database. I pitched to a few people the second time and they came to me saying that we've already heard your pitch. So they remember, like even if we don't remember the team that we pitched to, because we are always in that, we are sometimes very blind, we are very tense, but they remember our pitches. So always treat them with that respect. So these are the two things that I have noticed when it comes to VC pitching versus CSR or any innovation grant pitching.
Interesting. So, I mean, you are covering both sides. You were profitable from the very beginning, so you are a choice for VC. You have a social impact, so you are a go-to person for social impact funds. But having said that, I mean, just a question: is it a choice or is it like luck that hasn't played in your favor as yet? Why are you still bootstrap when you are kind of managing both sides very well, where you are a profitable business with a very good social impact? So why still bootstrap? Is it a choice or you think it's more to go to luck as of now?
It is a choice right now because we are exploring B2B as well as B2C as well as B2B2C. We are only choosing a few things that we can actually work out very well and move ahead and expand as we grow. So it has always been our choice not to straight away go and pitch at a VC and raise funds, because we have so many grants and so many ways of building our business without giving away equity in this very early stage. Why not utilize them? And why to actually go, if you get into that mode, then we are, you have to go on. So, before that, when we are setting up and when we are gearing up for the stage, let's utilize all the grants and utilize all the support systems that are out there. So it has always been a choice.
Sorry to interrupt. So if I may ask, not with the numbers, but not with the numbers of figures of the fund, but how many of such CSR grants have you raised so far, and how has it helped you?
Yeah, so CSR grants, yes, exactly. As you said, it is very difficult to get our hands on a CSR fund, which brings in a lot of money, but at the same time, it is very difficult to crack that. We have always been getting grants, as in innovation grants from the government or the Nidhi grant from IIM Kozhikode, but we are actually applying and pitching and expecting certain miracles to happen very soon. But yeah, as you said, anyone who is looking to go in this grants route, CSR route, it is very hard work. Like every single day you have to be keeping your eyes and ears open in order to find such opportunities. pitch and get it right. Be always, have that same mood, that same energy when you pitch each time. And even if you come back not successful, that shouldn't be impacting our day's work or even the next pitch that we are having. So it is difficult. So is the case with VC. Like I know many people who did hundreds of pitches before they landed the right sort of VC connection. So if we are in this entrepreneurship business of, like business of business, we are supposed to do that. This is something that we can't live without. So I kind of enjoy it. I am the person who always goes and talks to people to, so for me, it has not been a challenge. You wake me up, I start pitching. So that's how much I've, practiced and came to this point.
No,
but
I definitely have personally seen that positive vibe even after the rejection. I mean,
that's
I was
part
very
of it. Yeah, that's part of it.
That's what I'm saying. I was very much involved in 1 or 2 engagements with Ashwati, and unfortunately, these things didn't work out. But the smile that never goes from her, like it's there. Okay, what's the next option? What can we try more? What can we do more?
That's
And she gives in her, this is something which we should actually learn from her after like going through 1 or 2 months of iteration, do this, do that, do this, do that. And then again, it comes up with a rejection. That's also, she's like very positive about, yeah, it's part now. Tell me what other options we have. No, and no negative vibe in that, very happy. So I think that is one of the things that makes Avasarshaaala grow so well and going ahead with this.
I look at it as an asset, like whenever there is a few, I mean, like we had gone through a certain journey, we are building assets or building information, knowledge in terms of these things. I learned a lot about CSR only when I got the first rejection. Like for me, I was looking at it as something like a grant, but now I totally get it. Like I understand exactly where to start and where it will all end. So that is an asset, right? For me, I learned as a person, as a business, we also build a lot of connections and we now know exactly whom to approach when we have certain projects coming up. So if you look at it that way, you are actually growing richer by each rejection.
Nice. No, and same with Anju. I mean, Anju had to, the organization that she's part of has been always pushing her that, you know what, you should move out of the incubator, run independently and do this, do that. And in that process, when Anju was raising funds through IIIT's corporate social program and on women impact, so she has to do like a lot of iterations. And I would like Anju to tell her journey about that. Is that your first fundraise, Anju, or you have raised earlier?
Yeah, so we started with a grant.
Anju, we need you to be little louder. Sorry.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we started with a grant from, just like Ashwati was saying. So we were fortunate to have a grant also, I've never worried about money. The money has come. After that grant got over, in fact, it ended in December. And I think in November was when we were pitching to y'all. And Anubhav, if you remember, at the end of the pitch you announced, of course, it's been a few months and the paperwork has taken longer than I expected, and thank you to your team for being very supportive through it. So I remember telling my mentor, just perhaps that same week, the mentor in Silicon Valley, that, everything else is going great. Our grant is ending next month. So that's just a small worry that I have, that, and it was like the universe heard that. And lo and behold, that same week, I mean, without my expecting, without my putting forth any extra effort, something came. Of course, we were not registered at that point of time as a separate entity. We were operating as part of a sister entity, and now we are a Section 8 company. So really, very grateful to Anubhav and team for being very patient with us as we navigated that whole process. So it just came. I didn't make a lot of plans for fundraising, or I know that going forward, I will need to we are profitable also. We don't need funds to operate, but we certainly need funds to scale. So for example, for this year, we are going from 46 women to 100 women. That is on the production side. And then in order to sell what these 100 women produce, sometimes I like to joke that the past 3 years, all I have really done is sell. Selling. One person, sales and marketing team. So that cannot continue. And moreover,
But you're happy selling this than the t-shirts, right?
Right. I had that karma that had to go, so I had to sell. But yes, you're right. Um, so so we are building that last mile delivery network of women resellers. As I mentioned earlier, Jharkhand, Odisha, and West Bengal are 3 states that we are working in, and so getting these women in place, having sort of 1 or 2 project managers who handhold and guide these women. That's what the funds are really needed for, and yeah, I don't worry about fundraising so much. So far we have been supported, in terms of when the funding need arose, the funding came, and it's not just the funding, but also the sort of the mentorship from Head Start and from the others we are associated with to use those funds in the right manner. We have kind of very frugal operations. We are India's first team to lower the price of one pad from 200 rupees plus to 60 rupees plus. So this was like achieved through relentless cost cutting, and Anubhav, again, thank you for standing by our side and seeing us through.
You know what you are doing? You will make Ashwati to take out a gun right now from there and like, where was I there?
Yeah, I'm hiding it here.
No, you people are doing amazing job, and Ashwati, don't worry. I mean, I'm trying. I'm trying much more on that side of it. So yeah, so 2 quick questions will wind up because we got enough content and the right content because the city and the nation is flooded with webinars right now, and we wanted to see what exactly we can get out of you both, which can help people choosing this line in and knows every functional area of this line. So we have covered how it started, the impact part of it, fundraising part of it. Now, 2 quick question is on the market side. One is on the market size and one is on the team. So what was your go-to-market strategy? What was your first pitch? And when did you feel like, okay, now it's no looking back on creating a prospect pipeline? I know it's a never-ending journey, but then now we have 10 people who can talk to other 5 people about Afsarshala or about Saukyam. But what was your strategy, or what was your plan when you first entered the market, and how did you get your first 3-4 clients, which were not friends, family, and fools? So taking a few insights at that. And the other thing is that hiring a team, a startup can't pay very fancy, then making them believe in your idea, then managing both of you haven't done any heavy fundraising. So managing this team, now you work with a different kind of team, Anju, with women, if I'm not wrong, with village women who are working on your production of this. Then Ashwati works with a different set of team. So first is go-to-market strategy, the first 3-4 customers. Second is hiring the right team and getting the right people. Ashwati, you can start.
Okay, so for us, we got this set of people who really believed in what we were doing as our initial customers. We have one of the most close, the people who actually keep us very close to our heart in this call itself. Rashmi, shout out to you, because there were parents like you who actually believed in us in the initial stages, and you still believe stay with us. So it's only people like Rashmi who actually, brought us into the space and, is pushing us every day in order to deliver more. We started out with our initial set of, as you said, friends, family, fools only. Like we brought together some opportunities for children. Like when we got this idea that we can do, and we brought together opportunities that happen in the coming few weeks, put it together in a single list and send it out to a few parents. They loved it. They said they even pay for it. So that was the starting of Avasar Shala. So with that, with confidence, we built a system around it. We created an automated system where we are actually cutting down a lot of work, hard labor, but we are actually delivering it through tech-enabled mechanism. So from there, we grew from the first 5 to 10 to 50 to 100 in the first few weeks. Then friendly customers like Rashmi came on board through referrals or through people who are already using Avasar Shala. Then the next stage, what we did was, it was pre-pandemic. We put up stalls, at educational fairs or consumer fests in order to interact with parents directly. This helped to actually understand the pulse of it. Like our initial set of customers are very, very friendly ones who actually, loved the concept, believed in us as people, and more than talking about Avasar Shala, they talk about Ashwati and Sandeep, the two people behind Avasar Shala. But when we actually stepped out and met people who don't know us, that's when we understood how does this market work. We did not talk to customers as co-founders. We talked to them as sales executives. The feedback that comes to us as unbiased. When you say that you are the owner of the company, they don't usually open up. But when you say that you are just a sales executive, they tend to, give more information, valuable feedback and data points. So that helped us a lot. This was how we grew in the initial days. So this is how the market acquisition or that worked. And when it comes to team, we did not hire straight away. What we did was we engaged with freelancers. We engaged with part-time people who contributed part-time, as well as with interns. So both of us banged on our respective colleges a lot. Still we are. We are alumni of the same college, Model Engineering College. So both of us could bring in very talented interns and people who actually believe in our idea on board. They benefited with some work that they could take back as their experience. We also benefited from their knowledge. Although interns require a little bit too much of hand-holding, this helps an initial startup. We are having freelancers now. 2 or 3 people are working full-time with us, which is a big step, which was a big step for us, because that also means a lot of spending to keep them with us. And taking in employees when you're a small startup, it's actually a very, we look at it very cautiously because we are responsible for their growth also. Even if it is an intern, they are spending their 2 months, which they probably could have spent elsewhere. They chose us, they came to us. We are very responsible for what they take back. So any intern, any part-time employee or any full-time employee who engages with us, we make sure that they get added, added benefit, not just in terms of money or an experience certificate. They take back more than that. Either we connect them with people who could, if it is an intern, we connect them with people who could give them permanent jobs. If they want to continue with us for a certain time, we look at it in a way that they either, we help them skill up, get new additional skills which they did not bring in, or connect them with mentors who could help them in their future, higher studies or whatever. So we have put in a lot of effort in that way. It's a lot of effort in itself, bringing the right opportunities for children as well as for employees who engage with us. So, but it's worth it. Finally, they are the ones who vouch for us. They go out and talk about us, and it has always been like a good thing. I'll highlight very small trivial happiness that I have had. I worked with FactSet, I worked with Amazon, and in this recent newsletter that came out, my company was amongst FactSet and like FactSet, Amazon, and Avsarshala in the same pamphlet, where employers who came to Model Engineering College. That was such a huge moment for me, to see my own company amongst the old companies that I worked with. So treat your first employees. Yeah, it was a very huge milestone for me.
Good one, good one. Thank you, Ashwati. So, Anju, your take, how did you enter the market? What was it like not very tough, or was it tough to enter the market? And then, as you were mentioning, for teams, would like to hear some insights on getting the right team, getting the right people to believe in your idea, and struggle because we don't pay so fancy, because we don't have to pay something fancy, because we don't have that kind of fund. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you, Ashwati. That is a great sharing, and Anubhav. So, I remember we launched the pads in October 2017, and this was Amma's annual birthday celebrations are there, where lots of people congregate at a place. So we had a stall, and the first time ever. And I think we sold some 20,000 worth of pads. And of course, our team wanted to go and give it to Amma as our first token sales. And although Amma said that all of this money has to be used for development of the same villages where the pads are made in, but that was our first, first thing. But I remember after the birthday, I had this sick feeling in my stomach. I looked around, and I was part of Amrita University then. I still am, I guess, in some ways. And in my office, there were only pads everywhere. The village women had worked very hard for 2 months prior to the launch to produce these pads. And I was like, oh, are we going to have to wait for next year, Amma's birthday again, to sell these pads? And then they're producing every month. We have taught them, we have given them training, and so month to month inventory is coming. How am I going to sell all this? Where are we going to, who's going to buy? And so I remember that from there having come to where sometimes these days, we are struggling to keep up with orders. We don't have inventory built up usually. When we do, like, our stitching people are so happy, and they even hide it from me that, okay, let this box, finish before sort of. So how did we sell? We of course started selling online, but that takes its own due course of time. In January, we launched the website. We started doing awareness workshops. And in these awareness workshops, now things have changed. Now a lot more people know about reusable pads. At that time, this in the audiences that we would address, most people, if one or two women have heard of it, that's a great thing. But most people would not have heard of reusable pads. One thing that we tried to do in the awareness workshops was never, push our product or push any brand, including our own. These were purely awareness workshops that talked about disposable pads, the environmental and the social benefits or the dangers of, using either one. Talked about the economic aspects, how much money you spend and how much money you save and so forth. And this got us a lot of orders. And at one point of time, so there were about 2-3 volunteers who were helping me with these awareness workshops. We couldn't hire people for doing the awareness workshops. There was not a 1-person team, maybe a 2 to 3-person team, but I myself might have done 80% of these workshops. At one point of time, no matter where in the country, whoever's calling, now it's become so easy, just on Zoom. But I think the year before the pandemic, later we tabulated, so almost 1 workshop per week, and in different parts of the country, no matter, wherever, remote, non-remote, rural, urban, whoever wanted these, we did it. And but that's helped. How did we build our team, or who did we hire? So prior to our Saukyam Pads project being started, and now it's a full-fledged company, a Section 8 company, for about 3 or 4 years in 2013, the MUT had adopted these villages. And I was also part of the team that traveled to these villages in about 20 states of India and helping put in, free tuition classes or other things we trained health workers. Sometimes these remote hamlets or these villages would not be served by ASHA workers. So then these health workers would be the support for ASHA workers and so on. And so as a result of that project, one of the things that I had helped put the team together for that to a large extent, one of the things that we saw was we can get, women from the villages, train them, handhold them, and they would become such great employees. The growth in them is quite astounding. Their self-confidence and their ability to get things done. So, of course, having a few employees with, the kind of backgrounds that we come from, having an MBA or an engineering degree and so on. And when we had the grant, we were able to do that. We had 4 employees of that type as well. And now I'm hoping to, be able to have perhaps at least 2 or 3. Like I said earlier, we advertised for 2 open positions and we received so many resumes. So we have shortlisted and we will be adding, but mostly we depend on educated village women. They may have a 12th standard education, or they may have some of them do have a graduation degree also, though it is far less. Very rare to find somebody with a postgraduate degree, but with the right kind of mentoring and support, they can be such good employees who, you can really build a team at the grassroots level. So that's been kind of our approach to this.
Thank you so much. With this, I won't spoil your Saturday much. I guess 1 hour is 1 hour is enough. But very interesting insights, very focused discussion happened across. Thank you, Ashwati and Anju, for joining last minute. Anju was little buzzed with her vaccine already, but she she was like, okay, we'll take it up. Thanks so much for supporting us and bringing these insights together. This will help us a lot, and all those wannabe entrepreneurs or people who are going to explore entrepreneurship will get a lot of this insights and what to explore and what not. Though we wanted to focus it on women, but the discussion went on very interestingly, and it is all for startups, and that's what you two define. So thank you so much for your time.
So Anubhav, if you want me to add a few things just to give it a women entrepreneur aspect.
You should.
From my experience, I'll say something. It's always hard to find the right network. When you are asking me about the AICs or the ecosystem that I got in touch with, it was all about the business aspect. But for a personal growth, there is always this right network that we have to latch on to. Because I, as Anju might also know this, the women entrepreneurs that we can look up to in our own areas are very less. So now when I look at some women leaders, I find some aspects where they are, they went through the same journey as me, but not everything. But, it's very hard to figure out exactly how did they reach there, how much effort did they put before they became so-and-so person. So, it's mostly undocumented. You only hear about successful women once they are, fall into that bracket of successful in terms of either raising funds or becoming, famous. But, there are many women who go through this journey, and it is difficult for us to figure out whom to actually connect. For me, Head Start was one of the networks that actually helped me, because when I went into many different entrepreneurial networks, in order to ask the right question and get the right answer has always been difficult. Sometimes my voice is literally not heard. Sometimes the answers I get really don't have anything to do with what I'm doing. But with Head Start, I've been able to, as I'm a volunteer also, we have this huge now network of people who are just there to help out entrepreneurs, and they don't look at our gender in order to help out. So getting in touch with such networks, give your best to these networks and take back learnings from them. That has always been my motto. I'm part of something else called Global Shapers, which is a network from World Economic Forum, youth network of World Economic Forum. Nothing to do with entrepreneurship, but it is everything to do with social impact. So from there also, I have made a lot of friends internationally. I give my best. I am a curator at One City Hub right now. So, it's a full-time job for me, juggling it with entrepreneurship.
So can you quickly talk about Global Shaper? What is the criteria of somebody becoming part of it, and how can people try for that?
So Global Shapers is a network of young people from the age group of 21 to 30, which is, it follows the mandate of World Economic Forum. It's the city level hub initiative, or a voluntary initiative of young people, which follows the rules and regulations, or the loose mandates that are set in place by the headquarters in Geneva. So why we do this is because we can take up UN SDG goals or impact areas that align well with our cities. Because we have the branding of Global Shapers, it is easy for us to reach out to diplomats, ask them exactly what we want, and start out projects that help the city that we are part of. So people, it is difficult for us to talk with people like Shashi Tharoor, for example, if he is in a certain city, and if we want to do something, because I'm talking about Trivandrum hub, Trivandrum city that I am part of. Here, if we want to talk to a certain person and tell them that we are running such a project, do you want to be part of it? When we say that we are from Global Shapers, it opens our doors faster. So, when we have such networks at city level, make use of it. I started out my journey there only because I met other young leaders or people who are, having lofty dreams, also of my same age group from that city. But now I'm a curator and I'm investing a lot of time there. I built my own international friends circle from this group. Same goes with Head Start, because when I started out, it was just my city, connecting with a few volunteers who knew what is Head Start. But now I'm part of a huge network of people who know exactly how this works. So if I have a certain thing going on today, I just have to put it in the group, or, just have to reach, I get the right contact. So being part of such networks is important. And especially since you're a woman entrepreneur, I mean, anyone who's listening.
So if someone is beyond the age of 30, is there any way they can connect with Global Shapers?
Global Shapers, yes, only as a mentor, or it depends. Each city has their own way of involving, either as a mentor or an advisor. But anyone above the age of 30, for the same, they have another thing called Young YCL. So that is for that's for high-flying leaders who have shown impact in their areas. It's also by World Economic Forum, and it's something that is highly coveted. So that's something anyone can aspire for. But, us young people, Global Shapers is the starting point, at least. Find the networks. I mean, I just found two huge networks that worked in my favor, but there are a lot of other things which we can explore. Make friends, and only then you will actually start, opening the right doors. So
I'm thankful to Head Start for connecting me to you both, because Head Start was the reason which got me, and two amazing entrepreneurs that I can think of. I am talking to right now. Anju, any last
I'm talking to you now as an entrepreneur, but for a very long time, I was just a volunteer, right? I mean, I would be sitting on the other side and looking at other entrepreneurs gain from Head Start as a network. It took me so many months of working for Head Start, for other entrepreneurs, until I came into a position where I am benefiting from Head Start in a way. So it's always a journey, but you have to juggle it with your full-time entrepreneurial venture, because building the network, finding friends is very important.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Anju, you have some last comments?
Yes. So talking of networks, there is a Women in Indian Social Entrepreneurship Network. And in fact, I have been thinking of reaching out to you all at Head Start. And when you run the women dedicated incubate sort of the cohorts, if that's something that can be done in partnership with us. The Women in Indian Social Entrepreneurship Network is a very new network, and there are 40 amazing women. Sometimes I feel, I'm of course very, very grateful to be there, but I feel, okay, I got in, I haven't done half as much as what they have been able to accomplish. Solving very difficult problems, women have built successful businesses, and we have all gotten to know each other virtually. This was over the last 1 year, and people, they are there for you. So just like Ashwati said, having role models, there was a very nice discussion on the WhatsApp group of Wisden yesterday, where someone was telling what problems they went through to get there, to open their FCRA account. Now you have to open it in Delhi, and so it was a learning for the rest of us to hear all of these things. And Wisden is there. Head Start is of course there. Head Start is a great resource for any entrepreneurs in India. And I also benefited from Miller Center, which is an international incubator for impact organizations. So totally, I resonate with what Ashwati said. Having these, being part of these focused networks can help you so much on your journey. And not just taking, but you are in a position to give a lot also. So.
Sure. Thank you so much, Anju. Thank you, Ashwati. Take care. Bye-bye, and keep inspiring and stay in touch. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.